The research station Harmony's light drifted silently through the void between star systems, its crystalline hull catching fragments of distant starlight. For 3 cycles, the mixed crew of Zilani scientists had been studying the peculiar energy readings emanating from an unexplored sector of space. What they discovered would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. Dr. Vexhai adjusted her breathing apparatus as she reviewed the latest sensor data. The Zilani were a delicate species, evolved on worlds with gentle atmospheres and mild gravitational fields. Their translucent skin revealed the soft glow of their internal organs, and their 4 slender arms moved with the grace of beings who had never known true hardship. Around her, the bridge hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology designed by a civilization that prized harmony above all else. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases, reported Science Officer Luan Ti from her station. Her voice carried the melodic quality common to all Zilani's speech, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. It appears to be artificial, but the power output readings are impossible. No known species could generate such levels of energy without destroying themselves. Captain Morin floated closer to the main display, his gossamer wings barely stirring the recycled air. The Zilani had evolved from creatures similar to Earth's butterflies, though they had long since transcended their humble origins. Could it be a natural phenomenon? Perhaps some kind of stellar remnant we haven't cataloged? The science team exchanged uncertain glances. They had been part of the Galactic Collective for over 1,000 cycles, and their species had encountered dozens of others in that time. The galaxy seemed full of gentle, intelligent races who had all evolved along similar paths. They had learned to expect certain patterns in how civilizations developed, and this energy signature fit none of them. Negative, Captain, Vexhai replied, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she processed the data. The pattern is too regular, too controlled. This has to be artificial. But the implications... She trailed off, unwilling to voice what they were all thinking. The implications were staggering. If a species existed that could generate such power, they would dwarf anything the collective had ever encountered. The most advanced civilizations they knew of were energy-conscious peoples like the Threnchi, who could manipulate stellar radiation, or the Polmarca, masters of gravitational fields. But this was orders of magnitude beyond anything they had achieved. Young navigator Kesri spoke up from her post, her voice trembling slightly. As the newest member of the crew, she often voiced questions the others were too experienced to ask. What if they're hostile? The collective has protocols for first contact, but those assume we're dealing with species of similar technological levels. The bridge fell silent. In all their history, the Zilani had never encountered a hostile species. Neither had any other member of the collective. Warfare was a concept they understood only in theoretical terms, something that primitive species might engage in before they achieved true civilization. The idea that an advanced species might be aggressive was almost unthinkable. Captain Morin's antennae twitched as he considered their options. We maintain our position and continue monitoring. If this is indeed an advanced civilization, first contact protocols demand we approach with caution and respect. Send a message to the Collective Council updating them on our findings. Hours passed as the crew continued their observations. The energy readings remained consistent, emanating from what appeared to be a single point source deeper in the unexplored system. Long-range sensors detected several planetary bodies, but the distances made detailed analysis impossible. Whatever was generating the signal appeared to be located on or near the 3rd planet from the local star. As the ship's cycle progressed into what passed for night aboard the station, strange new readings began to appear on their sensors. Ships, dozens of them, emerging from what appeared to be some kind of faster-than-light travel near the energy source. But these vessels defied everything the Zilani understood about spacecraft design. Captain, Luan Ti's voice carried a note of alarm that was rare among their peaceful species. I'm detecting multiple spacecraft, but their configurations are unprecedented. They appear to be constructed with materials I cannot identify, and Their energy signatures suggest propulsion systems that should not be possible. The main screen shifted to display the detected vessels. What they saw challenged every assumption they held about advanced civilizations. The ships were angular, aggressive-looking things covered in what appeared to be armor plating. Instead of the smooth, organic curves that characterize collective vessels, these craft looked like they were designed for conflict. Weapon signatures blazed across their hulls like warning beacons. Impossible, whispered Dr. Vexai. No civilized species builds ships like that. Those are warships designed for combat. But why would an advanced species need weapons of war? The answer came sooner than they expected. The alien fleet began moving through the system with purpose, their formations suggesting military precision. Wherever they went, smaller energy signatures vanished from the sensors. Bases, outposts, perhaps even inhabited worlds were being systematically eliminated. They're destroying everything in their path, Navigator Kesri reported, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain, whatever these beings are, they're not like us. They're not like anyone in the collective. They're killers. Captain Morin felt his delicate constitution, struggling with concepts his mind had never been forced to process. Violence on this scale was beyond his comprehension. The collective had known peace for so long that they had no framework for understanding what they were witnessing. We need to warn the others, he decided. Send an immediate priority message to the Collective Council. Include all our sensor data. The galaxy faces a threat unlike anything we've ever encountered. But even as Science Officer Luan Ti began preparing the transmission, their sensors detected something that chilled them to their cores. The alien fleet had changed course. They were heading directly toward collective space. They've seen us, Dr. Vexai announced, her voice laden with despair. They know we're here, and they're coming for us. The crew of Harmony's Light watched in mounting horror as several of the alien warships broke off from the main fleet and began accelerating toward their position. The research vessel had been designed for exploration, not evasion. Their top speed will be laughable compared to what these aggressors were capable of. How long before they reach us? Captain Morin asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. At their current rate of acceleration, less than 6 hours, Captain. 6 hours. 6 hours before the collective's first encounter with truly hostile aliens would end in their destruction. Captain Morin closed his 4 eyes and tried to think. His species had always been philosophers and scientists, not warriors. They had no weapons aboard their ship beyond basic research tools. They couldn't fight, and they couldn't run, but they could warn others. Open an emergency channel to Collective Command, he ordered. Maximum priority, all available frequencies. The communication system activated with a soft chime, and Captain Morin began to compose what he knew would be his species' final message to the civilized galaxy. His words would need to convey the unthinkable, that somewhere in the void, killers were coming for them all. This is Captain Morin of the research vessel Harmony's Light. We are transmitting an emergency signal to all collective forces. We have encountered hostile aliens of unprecedented technological capability. They have systematically destroyed everything in their path and are now advancing toward collective space. Our vessel will be destroyed within hours, but our data has been uploaded to this transmission. He paused, struggling with the weight of what he was about to say next. To any civilization receiving this message, these beings are not like us. They are warriors-destroyers. The peaceful coexistence we have enjoyed for millennia means nothing to them. Prepare for war, because war is coming whether we want it or not. The transmission beam shot out into space, carrying its desperate warning across the galaxy. Behind it, the alien warships continued their relentless approach, their weapon systems already charging for the inevitable confrontation. As the hours passed, the crew of Harmony's Light continued monitoring the approaching fleet. What they discovered in those final moments would have surprised them if they had lived to understand its significance. Deep in the alien communication frequencies, buried beneath layers of encryption their computers couldn't break, they detected something unexpected: fear. The hunters were afraid of something. But what could possibly frighten beings capable of such destruction? What could make killers hesitate? The answer was already on its way, summoned by an emergency signal that would reach far beyond the boundaries of known space, to a small blue world where apex predators had learned to reach for the stars. Captain Morin's final log entry would later be found in the debris of his ship. They destroyed us as easily as crushing a flower. But in their communications, we heard something that gives us hope. They spoke of others, beings they called Deathworlders. Perhaps the galaxy is not as defenseless as we thought. The Collective Council received the warning 12 hours after Harmony's light was reduced to scattered atoms. By then, the invasion fleet had already begun its advance into civilized space, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. But they had also sent a signal of their own, a call for help that reached beyond the boundaries of the known galaxy. They had no idea that their desperate plea would be answered by the most dangerous species the universe had ever produced. The killers from a void had made their first critical mistake. They had summoned the attention of humanity. In a small communications facility on Earth's moon, an automated system detected an artificial signal from deep space. The message was unlike anything in their databases, encoded in mathematical sequences that suggested intelligence. But buried within the transmission were energy signatures that made the night shift operators sit up and take notice. "Sir," called Technician Martinez, her voice tight with excitement, "you need to see this. We're picking up what looks like a distress signal from outside the local group. The energy patterns suggest massive weapons fire." Commander Sarah Chun moved to the primary console, her military bearing evident even in the low-gravity environment. "Origin? Unknown, ma'am. But the transmission suggests multiple civilizations under attack by hostile forces. The math checks out, the physics are solid. This isn't a hoax." Commander Chin studied the data streaming across the screen. Humanity had been listening to the stars for decades, hoping to find evidence of intelligent life. They had never expected their first contact to be a desperate cry for help from dying civilizations. "Give me the Joint Chiefs," she ordered, "and wake up Dr. Yamamoto's team at SETI. If this is real, if there really are hostile aliens attacking peaceful species." She didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting for survival on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had evolved from persistence hunters who could chase prey across continents without stopping. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and each other. And now it seemed the galaxy had a problem that required exactly the kind of species that Earth had forged in its deadly crucible. The emergency signal from Harmony's light continued its journey through space, carrying its desperate warning to anyone who would listen. But it also carried something else, detailed sensor data of the attacking fleet. Information that would prove crucial to the warriors who were already beginning to stir in response to the call for help. In space docks around Earth and Mars, ships that had been designed for exploration were being rapidly retrofitted with weapons. The human space fleet was small, experimental, barely capable of maintaining a presence in their own solar system. But every vessel was crewed by members of a species that had never known a world without predators. The hunters from the void had made a critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that the galaxy contained only prey species, civilizations that had evolved in safety and comfort. They had never imagined that somewhere in the darkness, on a world so hostile that survival required constant vigilance, another kind of intelligence had been forged. The collective had sent out a call for help, and from the depths of space, death itself was answering. The Kethvar Empire had dominated their corner of the galaxy for over 10,000 standard cycles, and they had done so through one simple principle: the strong consumed the weak. Their homeworld of Keth Magna was a harsh place of constant storms and brutal competition, where only the most ruthless survived to reproduce. Evolution had shaped them into perfect predators, with razor-sharp claws, reinforced exoskeletons, and minds that processed violence as naturally as others processed mathematics. Admiral Grixon stood on the bridge of the flagship Bloodfang, his towering form casting shadows across the tactical displays. At 3 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms ending in natural weapons that could tear through steel, he embodied everything the Kethvar represented. His species had conquered 17 different star systems by systematically eliminating every other form of intelligent life they encountered. To them, the galaxy was a hunting ground, and every other species was simply prey waiting to be harvested. "Status report," he growled, his voice a rumbling bass that made the metal deck plates vibrate. The Kethvar language was harsh and guttural, evolved from the roars and snarls their ancestors had used to claim territory. Battle Coordinator Thekris approached with the submissive posture required when addressing a superior. Even among their own kind, the Kethvar maintained strict hierarchies based on personal combat ability. The outer settlements have been eliminated as planned, Admiral. 17 colonial outposts and 3 research stations destroyed. No survivors. Grixon's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The operation was proceeding exactly according to their established pattern. They would sweep through a region, eliminate all resistance, harvest whatever resources were useful, and move on to the next target. It was efficient, effective, and had served them well for millennia. And the fleeing vessel? Destroyed 6 hours ago, Admiral. A research ship of some kind. They transmitted what appeared to be a warning signal before we eliminated them. The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. Throughout their expansion, they had encountered dozens of species, and all had followed predictable patterns. When faced with the Kethvar fleet, they either surrendered immediately or fled in panic. None had ever mounted effective resistance. The galaxy seemed to be populated entirely by weak, soft species that had grown complacent in their peaceful civilizations. Analysis of the warning transmission. Thekris activated a holographic display showing the intercepted signal. Standard mathematical progression indicating intelligence, followed by pictographs depicting our fleet and attack patterns. They're trying to warn their allies about our approach. Let them, Grixon snarled. Fear serves our purposes. When species learn of our coming, they either flee their worlds or huddle in their cities waiting to die. Either response makes our work easier. The bridge crew continued their preparations for the next phase of the assault. Long-range sensors had identified a cluster of inhabited systems ahead, including what appeared to be several heavily populated worlds. The energy signatures suggested advanced technology, but that only meant better resources to claim once the inhabitants were eliminated. Admiral called Sensor Operator Vector from his station. "We're detecting an anomaly in the target zone." Grixon moved to the sensor station, his heavy footsteps echoing through the bridge. "Explain." Long-range scans show increased activity around the inhabited worlds. Ship movements, energy spikes, construction projects. They appear to be preparing for something. The Admiral's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species. Fortifications. Some of these prey species attempt to build defenses when they learn of our approach. It makes little difference. Their weapons are designed for peaceful purposes. They have no experience with true warfare. But as the Kethvar fleet advanced deeper into collective space, they began encountering signs that this region might be different from their previous conquests. Abandoned outposts showed evidence of hasty evacuation rather than panicked flight. Supply convoys were rerouted through defensive corridors rather than scattered randomly. Most concerning of all, their long-range communications intercepted transmissions in languages they had never encountered before. Battle Coordinator Admiral Grixon summoned Thekris to the command platform. "What do you make of these new communication frequencies?" Thekris studied the data with growing unease. "The encryption is unlike anything we've seen from local species, Admiral. The mathematical foundations suggest a completely different approach to technology. And the energy signatures. What about them? They're not consistent with the peaceful species we've encountered so far. These readings suggest combat-ready vessels, possibly even weapons we haven't cataloged." Admiral Grixon's confidence remained unshaken. The Kethvar had fought their way through the galaxy for 10 millennia. No species they had encountered could match their natural advantages in combat, combined with technology specifically designed for warfare. Even if these unknowns had weapons, they would lack the fundamental killer instinct necessary to use them effectively. Irrelevant, he decided. We proceed with the assault plan. Signal the fleet to assume standard formation. We begin the attack on the primary population centers in 18 hours. But the Kethvar admiral was about to learn that the galaxy contained more than just the gentle species his empire had grown accustomed to hunting. Deep in space, human reconnaissance drones had been tracking the invasion fleet for days, analyzing their technology and tactics. What they discovered sent shock waves through the Terran Defense Command. The approaching aliens were not explorers or even conquerors in the traditional sense. They were exterminators, moving through the galaxy with the systematic efficiency of a plague. Every world they had touched was left lifeless, its populations eliminated with ruthless precision. Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood in the command center of Mars Station Alpha, studying the tactical displays with the cold focus that had made her the youngest fleet admiral in human history. Around her, the combined leadership of Earth Space Forces worked with barely controlled urgency to prepare for what would be humanity's first interstellar war. Intelligence assessment confirms our worst fears, reported Colonel Zhang from the Analysis Division. These aliens, designation Kethvar, based on intercepted communications, appear to be apex predators from their homeworld. Everything about their technology and tactics suggests they evolved for large-scale warfare. Admiral Mitchell nodded grimly. The human military had been studying the scattered reports from fleeing refugee ships for weeks, building a picture of an enemy unlike anything they had imagined. The Kethvar were not just hostile. They were professionally hostile, with technology and doctrine refined over thousands of years of conquest. Fleet status? She asked. All available vessels are converging on the outer defense perimeter, replied Captain Torres. 47 ships total, including converted civilian vessels. It's not much against a fleet this size. 47 ships. The entire human space navy hastily assembled from exploration vessels, research platforms, and prototype warships that had never been tested in combat. Against them, an invasion fleet of over 200 Kethvar warships with technology centuries ahead of human engineering. But Admiral Mitchell had served in conflicts across Earth's most dangerous regions. She understood something that the Kethvar, in their millennia of hunting peaceful prey, had forgotten: the difference between predators and apex predators. The Kethvar had evolved to hunt other species. Humans had evolved to hunt everything, including each other. General Morrison, she addressed the Army representative, status on the volunteer battalions? Marine Expeditionary Forces are boarding now, the grizzled general replied. 20,000 volunteers for the first wave, with another 50,000 in reserve. Every one of them understands this is likely a one-way mission. 20,000 human soldiers, armed with weapons designed to kill other humans on a world that had been trying to kill them for millions of years. It seemed laughably inadequate against an interstellar empire. But these were not ordinary soldiers. These were descendants of persistence hunters who had chased mammoths across ice sheets, survivors of plagues and famines and wars that had shaped them into something unique in the galaxy. The first contact between the Kethvar fleet and human forces came in the asteroid belt between Jupiter and Mars. A single human patrol ship, the UTS Defiant, encountered a Kethvar scout vessel conducting reconnaissance of the inner system. Commander Lisa Park had volunteered for the forward patrol mission, knowing it would likely be fatal. The Defiant was a converted mining ship with hastily installed weapon systems and armor plating that wouldn't stop a determined meteor. Against a Kethvar warship, it should have been obliterated in seconds. But Commander Park had grown up in the Australian outback, where a moment's inattention could mean death from any of a dozen different predators. She understood patience, timing, and the art of making the enemy commit before revealing your position. The Kethvar scout, designated Hunter's Claw, approached the asteroid field with the confidence of a species that had never encountered effective resistance. Captain Vexmal expected to sweep through the area, catalog any defenses, and return to the main fleet with targeting data for the coming assault. Instead, he found himself facing something unprecedented, prey that fought back with intelligence and fury. The Defiant emerged from the asteroid field like an ancient submarine breaching the surface, weapons blazing from concealed positions. The human ship's armament was primitive compared to Keth-Var technology, but it was directed by tactical software developed through centuries of human conflict. Every shot was calculated for maximum effect, targeting not just the enemy vessel, but the psychological impact on its crew. "Impossible," snarled Captain Vexmal as his ship shuddered under the unexpected assault. "They should be fleeing. All prey species flee when confronted with superior force." But humans were not prey, and Commander Park had no intention of fleeing. The Defiant closed distance with a larger alien vessel, using the asteroid field for cover while pouring fire into the Keth-Var ship's weapon systems. It was a textbook example of asymmetric warfare, developed by a species that had learned to fight everything from saber-toothed cats to nuclear-armed dictatorships. The Hunter's Claw was designed to hunt fleeing vessels and bombard defenseless settlements. It was not prepared for an enemy that actively sought close combat with a superior force. The Keth-Var crew, despite their physical advantages and advanced weapons, found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents who treated impossible odds as just another day at the office. "They're targeting our sensor arrays specifically," reported the Keth-Var tactical officer. "This suggests detailed knowledge of our ship configuration." "How is that possible?" Captain Vexmal had no answer. The Keth-Var had never encountered species with military intelligence capabilities. In their experience, peaceful civilizations had no need for the kind of systematic analysis that could identify critical weaknesses in enemy vessels. The battle lasted 23 minutes and ended when the Defiant rammed the Keth-Var scout ship at maximum acceleration. Commander Park's final transmission to Mars Station Alpha was brief and to the point. "Enemy technology superior, but tactics are those of bullies, not warriors. They can be beaten. Make them pay for every meter of space." The destruction of the Hunter's Claw sent shock waves through the Keth-Var fleet. For the first time in their racial memory, one of their vessels had been destroyed not by superior firepower, but by an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Admiral Grixhan stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of his scout ship. Around him, the bridge crew maintained their professional demeanor, but he could sense their uncertainty. The comfortable assumptions that had guided Keth-Var expansion for millennia were beginning to crack. "Analysis?" he demanded. Battle Coordinator Thekris approached with obvious reluctance. The attacking vessel was technologically inferior in every measurable way, Admiral. But their tactics suggest extensive experience with asymmetric warfare. They fought not to win, but to inflict maximum damage before inevitable defeat. And this implies a species with a fundamentally different approach to conflict, Admiral. They appear to view suicidal attacks as acceptable tactical options. That level of commitment to warfare is unprecedented. Admiral Grixhan's 4 eyes narrowed as he processed this information. The Keth-Var had built their empire by understanding prey behavior. When threatened, species either submitted or fled. They did not choose death over defeat. They did not sacrifice themselves to wound their hunters. But as the invasion fleet prepared for its final approach to the inner system, long-range sensors began detecting activities that defied everything the Keth-Var thought they knew about galactic civilization. Ships were moving into attack positions rather than fleeing to safety. Energy readings suggested massive construction projects designed not for evacuation, but for resistance. Most disturbing of all, communication intercepts indicated that these unknowns were actively seeking battle with a superior force. "Admiral," reported sensor operator Vector, "we're detecting massive energy spikes from the third planet. It appears to be some kind of industrial conversion on a planetary scale." The main display shifted to show the small blue world that seemed to be the center of resistance activity. What they saw challenged every assumption about how civilized species responded to threats. Instead of desperate evacuation efforts, the planet showed signs of total mobilization for war. "They're not fleeing," whispered Thekris. "They're preparing to fight." Admiral Grixhan stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process concepts that had no place in Kethvar understanding of the galaxy. Somewhere ahead of them was a species that responded to overwhelming odds, not with surrender or flight, but with preparation for battle. For the first time in 10,000 years of conquest, a Kethvar admiral felt something his species had almost forgotten: uncertainty about the outcome of a hunt. The enemy was not behaving like prey, and that changed everything. The first full engagement between human and Kethvar forces took place in the orbital space around Jupiter, where Admiral Mitchell had chosen to make her stand. The gas giant's massive gravitational field and complex moon system provided tactical advantages that human forces desperately needed. Against the Kethvar's superior numbers and technology, the humans would need every edge they could create. Captain James Rodriguez commanded the heavy cruiser UTS Indomitable, hastily converted from a deep space exploration vessel. His crew of 200 had trained for 3 weeks on weapon systems that were still being calibrated as the enemy fleet approached. By every measure of military doctrine, they were hopelessly outmatched and should have been preparing for evacuation rather than battle. But Captain Rodriguez had grown up in the favelas of Sao Paulo, where survival meant fighting for everything you had against impossible odds. His weapons officer was a former gang member from Detroit who understood urban warfare better than most military theorists. His navigation specialist had served in submarine warfare, where patience and precision meant the difference between killing the enemy and being crushed by the ocean itself. "Enemy fleet entering engagement range," reported Lieutenant Commander Kim from the tactical station. "Reading 237 vessels, Admiral. They're maintaining standard formation, approaching on multiple vectors." Through the communication link, Admiral Mitchell's voice carried calm authority. "All ships, remember your training. We're not trying to win a conventional engagement. We're buying time and making them pay for every kilometer. Execute Pattern Delta on my mark." Pattern Delta was a tactical formation that no sane military force would attempt against superior numbers. Instead of maintaining safe distances and trading long-range fire, the human ships would close to knife-fighting range where their inferior technology might have a chance against alien armor. It was the space combat equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight, then getting close enough to use it. Admiral Grixhan watched the approaching human fleet with growing confusion. Instead of the standard defensive formations he expected, the enemy ships were accelerating directly toward his forces. Their course corrections suggested they were actively seeking close combat rather than trying to maintain standoff distances. Battle Coordinator, he summoned Thekris to the command platform, explained their tactical formation. Thekris studied the display with obvious bewilderment. "I cannot, Admiral. Their approach vector puts them at maximum disadvantage. At close range, our superior weapons and armor should allow us to destroy them with minimal losses. It appears to be suicidal." But Admiral Grixhan had spent enough years hunting to recognize something his subordinate missed. The approaching human ships moved with the coordination of a pack predator, not the desperate flailing of cornered prey. Their formation suggested experience with this type of engagement, as if they had fought similar battles before. The first exchange of fire came when the fleets were still thousands of kilometers apart. Kethvar particle beams lanced out with devastating accuracy, designed to cripple enemy vessels from safe distances. Several human ships took direct hits, their improvised armor buckling under weapons designed to penetrate purpose-built warship hulls. But instead of breaking off or returning long-range fire, the human fleet continued its headlong charge. Ships that should have been destroyed by the initial barrage kept fighting with damaged systems and hull breaches, their crews showing a level of damage tolerance that defied Kethvar understanding of survival instincts. Captain Rodriguez felt the indomitable shudder as a Kethvar beam punched through their forward armor. Damage reports flooded in from across the ship. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7, primary weapons array at 60%, life support compromised in 2 sections. "Sir," called his damage control officer, "we should withdraw. The ship can't take much more of this." "Negative," Rodriguez replied without hesitation. "All ships continue advance. Target their weapon systems, not their hulls. We need to get in close." It was a decision that would have been considered madness by any conventional military doctrine. The Indomitable was outgunned, out-armored, and outnumbered. Logic demanded withdrawal to preserve the ship and crew for future engagements. But Captain Rodriguez understood something that the Kethvar, in their millennia of hunting prey species, had never encountered. Sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose, even if it meant certain death. His crew had volunteered for this mission knowing the odds. They had come not to survive, but to make the enemy remember them. The human fleet closed to within a few hundred kilometers of the Kethvar formation, well inside the range where alien weapons had overwhelming advantages. But at that distance, human weapons designed for asteroid mining and planetary bombardment could finally penetrate Kethvar armor. More importantly, the aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that actively sought the kind of close-range slugging match they had never experienced. "Impossible," snarled Captain Deathvar from the bridge of the Kethvar destroyer Flesh Render. "They should be dead by now. How are they still fighting?" His tactical officer checked the sensors again, unable to believe the readings. "The lead vessel has lost 60% of its hull integrity and is still advancing, Captain. Life support appears to be failing on multiple decks, but they continue to return fire." The Indomitable was dying around Captain Rodriguez, but his crew continued to fight with the grim determination of a species that had evolved on a world where giving up meant extinction. Compartments sealed themselves as atmosphere leaked into space. Engineering crews worked in vacuum suits to keep weapons online. Medical teams treated casualties in corridors lit only by emergency lighting. But the ship's main guns never stopped firing, pouring depleted uranium shells and plasma bolts into the Kethvar destroyer at point-blank range. At these distances, even improvised human weapons could damage alien hulls, and Captain Rodriguez had no intention of wasting the opportunity. "Direct hit on their primary weapon array," reported Lieutenant Commander Kim, her voice steady despite the fact that her station was open to space and she was operating in an emergency suit. "Their forward shields are down. Target their bridge," Rodriguez ordered. "All remaining weapons, concentrated fire." The Flesh Render shuddered under the unexpected assault. Captain Deathvar had fought dozens of engagements during the Kethvar expansion, but always against enemies who fled when faced with superior firepower. The concept of an opponent willing to trade destruction for damage was completely outside his experience. "They're ramming us," screamed his sensor operator as the Indomitable changed course to intercept the Kethvar destroyer. "Sir, they're going to ram us." Captain Deathvar stared at his display in disbelief. Ramming attacks were the tactics of primitive species driven by desperation. No intelligent civilization would sacrifice a valuable warship and trained crew just to damage a single enemy vessel. It was wasteful, inefficient, and completely contrary to logical tactical doctrine. But logical tactical doctrine meant nothing to Captain Rodriguez. He had grown up learning that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to hit them hard enough that they remembered the pain. His ship was dying anyway. His crew was already lost. The only question was whether their deaths would mean something. "All hands, brace for impact," he announced over the ship's communication system. "It's been an honor serving with you." The Indomitable struck the Flesh Render at full acceleration, her reinforced prow punching through alien armor like a kinetic weapon. Both ships died in a spectacular explosion that lit up the space between Jupiter's moons, but the psychological impact on the Kethvar fleet was far greater than the tactical loss. Admiral Grixhan watched his destroyer die and felt something his species had not experienced in 10,000 years: doubt. The humans were not fighting like prey species. They were fighting like predators, willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to wound their enemies. "Status report," he demanded, his voice carrying uncertainty for the first time since the campaign began. Battle Coordinator Thekris approached with obvious reluctance. 17 enemy vessels destroyed, Admiral, but at a cost of 9 of our own ships. The enemy appears willing to accept catastrophic losses in exchange for any damage to our forces. 9 Kethvar warships destroyed in a single engagement. The Admiral stared at the tactical display, trying to process numbers that defied everything he knew about warfare. In 10,000 years of expansion, the Kethvar had rarely lost more than 1 or 2 ships in any engagement. Prey species either surrendered or fled long before they could inflict significant damage. Recommend withdrawal to defensive positions, continued Thekris. We can bombard their positions from range, force them to come to us. No, Admiral Grixhan snarled, his pride stung by the suggestion of retreat. We are Kethvar. We do not flee from prey, no matter how fierce they may seem. Signal the fleet to maintain advance. We end this. But, as the Kethvar fleet approached the inner system, they discovered that the humans had prepared more than just suicidal tactics. The moons of Jupiter had been converted into fortress positions, their surfaces bristling with weapons that had never appeared in any galactic database. More disturbing still, the energy signatures suggested technology that should not have been possible for a species so young. Admiral, reported sensor operator Vector, we're detecting massive installations on the planetary satellites. Energy readings suggest. I'm not sure what they suggest, sir. The power output is beyond our classification systems. The main display shifted to show Jupiter's major moons, each one transformed into a weapons platform of unprecedented scale. What the sensors detected challenged Kethvar understanding of military engineering. These were not defensive installations designed to repel attackers. These were siege weapons built to destroy entire fleets. Impossible, whispered Thekris. No species could build installations of this magnitude in such a short time. Our intelligence reports indicate they only learned of our existence weeks ago. But Admiral Grixhan was beginning to understand that intelligence reports meant nothing when dealing with a species that operated outside every known parameter. The humans were not just willing to fight impossible odds. They were capable of industrial mobilization on a scale that suggested their entire civilization was organized around the principle of warfare. Sir, called the communication officer, we're receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet. It appears to be directed at you personally. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of what appeared to be the human flagship. The being addressing them was smaller than a Kethvar warrior, with soft skin and no visible natural weapons. But the eyes that stared out from the screen carried an intelligence that Admiral Grixhan recognized, the look of an apex predator evaluating its prey. I am Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Force, the human said, her voice carrying calm authority. You have entered our system and destroyed our allies. This is your only opportunity to withdraw. Admiral Grixhan activated his own communication system, drawing himself to full height to present the most intimidating image possible. I am Admiral Grixhan of the Kethvar Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems and eliminated dozens of species. You will surrender your worlds or share their fate. The human admiral studied him for a moment, and when she spoke again, her words carried a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. Admiral, you have made a critical error in judgment. You assume that because we're new to space, we're new to war. Let me correct that assumption. The screen flickered to show images from Earth's surface. Vast factories producing weapons at impossible rates. Training facilities where humans learn to fight in environments that would kill most galactic species. Archives containing the recorded history of thousands of years of human conflict. We have been at war with our own world for millions of years, Admiral Mitchell continued. We have fought ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. We have developed weapons capable of destroying our own planet, and learned to live with the knowledge that any day might be our last. The images shifted to show human soldiers training for combat, their movements carrying the fluid grace of born predators. But what disturbed Admiral Grixhan most was not their physical capabilities, but the look in their eyes. These were not the desperate expressions of prey species fighting for survival. These were the cold, calculating gazes of hunters who had found worthy prey. "You call yourselves an empire," the human admiral said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any roar. "But empires can fall. Ask our historians about Rome, or Mongolia, or any of the dozen civilizations that thought they were destined to rule forever. We remember them all." The transmission ended, leaving the Kethvar bridge in uncomfortable silence. Admiral Grixhan stared at the empty screen, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. For the first time in his species' history, they had encountered prey that spoke to them as equals. More than equals, as fellow predators. "Admiral," Thekris spoke carefully, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach. These humans appear to have capabilities we did not anticipate." But Admiral Grixhan's pride would not allow him to show weakness before his crew. The Kethvar had built their empire on the principle that strength was the only truth that mattered. To retreat now would undermine everything their civilization represented. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We advance to maximum weapons range and commence bombardment. If they want to fight, we will show them what real warfare means." As the Kethvar fleet moved into attack position, Admiral Mitchell prepared to demonstrate exactly what an industrial species could accomplish when their survival was threatened. The weapons installations on Jupiter's moons were just the beginning. Hidden throughout the system were defensive measures that had been designed by a species that understood that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be better at war than anyone else. The second phase of the battle was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn why some worlds produced explorers, while others produced apex predators. The bombardment of Jupiter's moons began at maximum range, with the Kethvar fleet unleashing concentrated firepower that should have reduced the human installations to molten slag within minutes. For 10,000 years, this strategy had proven effective against every species they encountered. Overwhelming firepower applied from safe distances, forcing enemies to surrender or flee before they could mount effective resistance. But the humans had spent 3 weeks studying Kethvar tactics from the sensor data provided by fleeing refugee ships. Every weapon placement, every defensive position had been designed with one goal in mind: to survive long enough to hurt the enemy. What Admiral Grixhan thought would be a quick bombardment became a grinding siege against an enemy that refused to die. The first surprise came when the Kethvar particle beams struck the moon installations. Instead of the catastrophic explosions expected from direct hits on weapon emplacements, the beams were absorbed by defensive screens that blazed to life across the lunar surfaces. Energy readings spiked beyond Kethvar measurement systems as the human installations converted incoming fire into power for their own weapons. "Impossible," snarled Admiral Grixhan as his tactical display showed the enemy positions not only surviving, but growing stronger under bombardment. "No species has defensive technology that advanced." Battle Coordinator Thekris checked the sensor readings again, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Admiral, they appear to be using our own weapon energy to charge their defensive systems. This suggests technology centuries beyond what we've encountered from any galactic civilization." But what the Kethvar saw as impossible technology was actually the result of 3 weeks of desperate engineering by a species that had learned to turn every disadvantage into a weapon. Human scientists had analyzed the energy signatures of Kethvar weapons and designed adaptive shields that could channel that energy into their own power grids. It was not advanced technology. It was advanced understanding of their enemy's capabilities. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the defensive screens from the command center buried deep within Europa's ice crust. Around her, technicians monitored systems that had been assembled from mining equipment, research tools, and pure human ingenuity. The weapons that were about to fire on the Kethvar fleet had been built by engineers who understood that sometimes you had to break every rule to save everything that mattered. "Charge levels at 90% and climbing," reported Chief Engineer Murphy from his position at the main power console. "The aliens are practically charging our weapons for us." Dr. Vasquez allowed herself a grim smile. The Kethvar had made the classic mistake of assuming their enemies would fight using familiar tactics. But humans had learned warfare from a world that killed its children with everything from diseases to natural disasters. They understood adaptation in ways that species evolved on gentler worlds could never comprehend. "Signal Admiral Mitchell," she ordered. "Fortress Europa ready to engage." Similar reports came in from installations on Ganymede, Callisto, and Io. Each position had been designed around different tactical principles, creating a defensive network that would force the Kethvar to adapt to multiple threats simultaneously. It was military doctrine developed by a species that had fought wars on every continent of their homeworld for thousands of years. Admiral Mitchell received the status reports from her flagship position behind Jupiter's massive bulk. The first phase of the battle had cost her 17 ships and over 8,000 personnel, but it had also provided invaluable intelligence about Kethvar capabilities and tactics. Now it was time to demonstrate what humans could accomplish when they stopped playing defense. "All fortress positions, you are cleared to engage," she transmitted. "Show them what Deathworlders can build when we put our minds to it." The lunar installations opened fire simultaneously, unleashing weapons that had never existed in any galactic database. Particle accelerators designed for physics research had been converted into ship-killing beam weapons. Mass drivers built for asteroid mining now hurl projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Most devastating of all were the gravity well generators, mining tools repurposed to create localized distortions in space-time itself. The Kethvar fleet found itself under attack from weapons that violated their understanding of what was possible. Ships designed to survive particle beam bombardments were torn apart by projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Vessels that had weathered the fire of entire civilizations were crushed by artificial gravity, fields that compressed their hulls like tin cans. Captain Nextar commanded the heavy cruiser Bone Crusher, a veteran ship that had participated in the conquest of 7 star systems. His vessel's armor had been forged from materials stronger than any naturally occurring substance, and its weapons could reduce planets to radioactive ash. Against the improvised defenses of a primitive species, it should have been invincible. Instead, he found himself fighting for survival against enemies who seemed to understand his ship better than he did. Human targeting systems identified the weak points in Kethvar armor with surgical precision. Their weapons were directed not just at his vessel's hull, but at specific systems whose destruction would cripple his ability to fight. Engineering reports critical damage to the primary reactor, called his second-in-command. Navigation is offline. Weapons systems at 40% efficiency. Captain Nextar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The Bone Crusher had been designed by the finest Kethvar engineers, incorporating lessons learned from 10,000 years of conquest. How could primitive weapons piloted by an unknown species be dismantling his ship with such precision? The answer came in the form of a human communication beam that penetrated his ship's encryption as if it didn't exist. Captain Nextar found himself face to face with a being that looked nothing like the fierce warriors he had expected. The human was small, soft-looking, with graying hair and tired eyes. But when she spoke, her words carried the authority of someone who understood warfare better than most Kethvar commanders. "Captain," said the human, her voice calm despite the battle raging around them. "This is Colonel Martinez, Terra Marine Corps. Your ship is disabled. Your crew is dying. Surrender now, and we will provide medical assistance." Captain Nextar's mandibles spread in what his species considered a threat display. "Kethvar, do not surrender to prey species. We will die before we show weakness." The human studied him for a moment, her expression showing what appeared to be genuine sadness. "Captain, we have been monitoring your internal communications. Your crew is trapped in sections of the ship that are losing atmosphere. Your medical bay is destroyed. If you don't accept our help, 300 beings will suffocate in the next 20 minutes. It was a concept that challenged everything Captain Nextar understood about warfare. Enemy species were supposed to seek the complete destruction of their opponents. The idea that humans would offer medical aid to the crews of ships they had just disabled was completely outside Kethvar experience. "Why?" he asked, genuinely confused. "We came to destroy your worlds and eliminate your species. Why would you preserve our lives?" Colonel Martinez leaned forward slightly, her tired eyes carrying an expression of infinite weariness. "Because we know what it's like to be soldiers following orders from leaders who don't understand the cost of war. Because some of us have been where you are now. And because killing everyone who opposes us is how you create new enemies, not how you end wars." The transmission ended, leaving Captain Nextar alone with thoughts that had no place in Kethvar military doctrine. Around him, his ship continued to die while human rescue teams approached through the vacuum of space. For the first time in his military career, he found himself considering surrender not as an act of cowardice, but as an act of responsibility to his crew. Meanwhile, Admiral Grixhan watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy that fought according to no rules he understood. Kethvar military doctrine was based on overwhelming force applied without mercy. Victory came through the complete destruction of enemy capabilities and the elimination of any possibility of future resistance. But the humans seemed to be fighting a completely different kind of war. They disabled ships instead of destroying them. They offered medical aid to enemies. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be trying to minimize casualties on both sides while still achieving their tactical objectives. "Admiral," reported Thekris, 47 ships have been disabled by enemy fire. Casualties are surprisingly light. The humans appear to be targeting specific systems rather than attempting to destroy our vessels outright." Admiral Grixhan stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process a battle that made no sense according to Kethvar understanding. His fleet was losing, but his crews were surviving. The enemy was winning, but they were preserving the lives of beings who had come to exterminate them. "It's a trap," he decided. "They're keeping our crews alive to use as hostages or slaves. No species shows mercy to enemies without ulterior motives." But even as he spoke, long-range sensors detected human medical ships approaching disabled Kethvar vessels. Instead of boarding parties with weapons, the aliens were sending doctors and rescue teams. Enemy behavior that defied every principle of logical warfare. The realization that struck Admiral Grixhan then was perhaps the most disturbing discovery in 10,000 years of Kethvar expansion. They were not fighting another predator species. They were fighting something far more dangerous, a species that had learned to be predators by choice rather than evolution, and who could therefore choose to be something else. Dr. Sarah Kim led the medical team that boarded the disabled Kethvar cruiser Death's Edge. Her team consisted of combat medics who had volunteered for what everyone understood was likely a suicide mission. The interior of a Kethvar warship was designed for beings with natural weapons and reinforced exoskeletons. Humans in pressure suits were fragile visitors in an environment built by and for killers. But Dr. Kim had served in humanitarian missions across Earth's most dangerous regions. She understood that sometimes saving lives required walking into the places where death was most likely to find you. The Kethvar crew she encountered were unlike anything in human imagination. 3-meter-tall beings with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, exoskeletons that could deflect small arms fire, and faces designed to inspire terror in prey species. Everything about their evolution suggested they were perfect killing machines. But they were also dying, trapped in compartments filling with toxic gases from their damaged life support systems. And Dr. Kim had sworn an oath to preserve life, regardless of whose life it was. "This section is sealed," reported Sergeant Williams, her security escort. "Atmosphere is compromised, but our sensors show 17 life signs inside." Dr. Kim checked her equipment pack and activated her cutting tools. "Then we get them out, same as we would for our own people." The rescue took 3 hours of dangerous work in a ship that could have decompressed or exploded at any moment. But when it was over, 17 Kethvar warriors who had come to destroy humanity were alive, because humans had risked their lives to save them. Captain Zekmar of the Death's Edge watched human medics treat his wounded crew with the same care they would have shown their own people. His mind, conditioned by millennia of Kethvar culture, could not process what he was witnessing. These beings should have been his prey. Instead, they were preserving lives that belonged to their enemies. "Why?" he asked Dr. Kim as she treated a plasma burn on his second officer's arm. "We came to kill you. Why do you save us?" Dr. Kim looked up from her work, her eyes visible through her helmet's faceplate. "Because that's who we choose to be. We could be killers. Our history proves we're very good at it. But we learned something from all those wars. The only way to end the fighting is to show your enemies that they don't have to be afraid of you." It was a concept so alien to Kethvar, thinking that Captain Zekmar had no framework for understanding it. His species had built their empire on fear, on the certainty that strength was the only truth that mattered. The idea that a species could choose to show mercy to enemies was completely outside his experience. But as human medical teams continued their work throughout his ship, saving lives that any logical military doctrine would have written off as acceptable losses, Captain Zekmar began to understand that these aliens were not just different from any species the Kethvar had encountered. They were different from any species that could exist according to Kethvar understanding of the universe. The battle for Jupiter's system was entering its final phase, and both sides were about to learn that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from showing them why they don't need to be your enemies anymore.